Hey guys, Coach Eric here, and as promised, I wanted to talk a little bit about that analogy that I referenced earlier, the one that has to do with the train. So I'm going to get right to it. And in this analogy, I want you guys to look at the human body as being analogous to a train, and the calories that we choose to eat or intake as being analogous to coal, right? The coal in this case is going to be the fuel that powers the engine of the train and gets you moving forward. So for ease of math, let's say we have a train that requires 2,000 calories a day to get from point A to point B where it needs to go for its destination. So the analogy for that would be, a person needing 2,000 calories to break even for their day, right? 2,000 calories in, 2,000 calories worth of energy out, energy expenditure out. And so that would be best case scenario. And on days where you get too many calories, right? Maybe you get 2,500 calories worth of coal dropped off. So your train, your coal shoveler on your train gets 500 more calories than he needs to actually put into the train to get where you're trying to go. So he puts the rest in the closet, right? And if you're following along so far, that would mean that if you have days where you have excess calories, meaning you're eating in a surplus, you're adding coal to that coal storage closet, i.e. you're adding body fat to your body, right? You're increasing your body fat stores, and we don't want that. So typically people would think, all right, I'll just eat in a calorie deficit and that'll fix everything because I'll have a 2,000 calorie daily requirement, i.e. the train needs 2,000 calories still, but I'm only going to take in, let's say 1,500 because my trainer said that's what I need to do. We calculated it out. I trust him or her, so I'm going to roll with that, and I'm going to lose this amount of weight because we talked about how those numbers should work, and this is what I'm expecting, and I'm ready to get to it. But as we know can often be the case, sometimes it's not that straightforward, right? So here's what could be happening. So what's normally supposed to happen is that when we have, let's say, that 2,000 calorie daily requirement for that person or that train, and we eat in a deficit, we're normally supposed to be able to go into our coal closet, our storage closet, i.e. our body fat stores, and get that energy, subtract that energy out of the closet, burn that fat storage, and that's how people get smaller and skinnier and lose adipose tissue over time. That's what's supposed to happen, right? But that process requires your body to be what's called fat adapted, meaning you have to be metabolically flexible, because the opposite of being fat adapted is being carb dependent, right? And typically when we're speaking of weight loss and specifically, weight loss that is significant in like the 20 to 30 pounds and over range, you're typically not dealing with metabolically flexible people, at least at the beginning, right? So maybe their body is not fat adapted because they're still carb dependent. And so their body's really only used to utilizing and interpreting one source of fuel. And now all of a sudden you're restricting it, right? So the only way that you could be successful with that is if your body knows exactly how and when to consistently unlock that coal closet and drain those coal storages, i.e. your adipose tissue, right? Now, if you're not fat adapted, if you're not having lifestyle changes that shift your body into fat adaptation or fat burning mode, whether it's through fasting or exercise, whether that's HIIT training, high intensity interval training, list training, long intensity steady state, a mix of it all, CrossFit, weightlifting, whatever the case is, you need to be doing something to get your body to have a metabolic need for more calories than you're taking in, while also making sure that that same stimuli is going to cause your body to recognize and then pull from its available fat storages rather than pulling from your carb storages, which you may or may not have on a calorie restricted diet. And so here's the problem that people run into, even on a calorie restriction diet where they're restricting calories, they're doing the right thing, they're still not losing the weight. Here's what's probably happening. Again, thinking about this analogy of the coal and the train as being the same as our body and our energy requirements. So say the person is taking in 1,500 calories because they're shooting for that 500 calorie a day deficit, and they're hoping to get those extra 500 calories that they still need for that daily journey, right? They still need 2,000. They're hoping to get that extra 500 from the coal closet, but they're not quite fat adapted yet, right? So maybe they think they're fasting properly, but they're not, and their body's not really getting into that clean, sustained fat burn. maybe they're stressing out, and that stress, that cortisol rise, or whatever could be going on hormonally, is causing them to not be able to lose the body fat. Maybe their hydration is suspect. Maybe it's not where it needs to be, and that's stressing their body out, causing them to not be able to break down the fat. Maybe all of that is okay, but their breathing is messed up. Maybe they don't have a great understanding of their breathing. And for those of you that don't know, that is how and where we lose most of our fat. It's not through excrement. It's not through any sort of thing that you can see, honestly, right? A lot of people think it's sweat or urine or something along those lines. Most of our fat is lost through our breath, right? And that's a whole deep explanation and rabbit hole in and of itself, but I know that's going to be a shocker to a lot of people. So if you didn't think your breathing was important before, hopefully that gives you some new perspective on why it should be not only a huge factor in your planning, but the factor in your planning. More on that later. But anyways, if you're expecting yourself to be able to make up your calorie shortfall and your body's not fat adapted, what's going to end up happening is that you still have that 2,000 calorie necessity for the day, but you only got maybe 1,500 calories, maybe slightly more if you got any of that fuel out of that storage closet, but you didn't get the 2,000 that you needed, so your train falls short of its destination, right? And if you keep having that cycle repeat itself over time, now your train can't even be programmed for 2,000 calorie journeys, because you have failed to get it the necessary allotment of energy that it needs on a day-to-day basis. So you're basically slowing your train down, and in this case, you're slowing your body's metabolism down specifically. It's a big no-go. That's not what we want, right? So here's another thing that complicates the issue. Say a person has that 1,500 calorie allotment, right? But say they haven't really been taught about nutrient timing or nutrient portioning. And so maybe they eat half of that in one particular meal. And so maybe they have a meal that's, bordering on 800 calories, and they're like, okay, cool. I'm only going to eat or snack one other time during, my time where I'm consuming calories for the day. So it's not really that big a deal. But remember, we're talking about shoveling this coal when it gets dropped off into the furnace for energy for the train, right? Maybe 800 calories was too much for that metabolically non-flexible person at that time, right? Maybe it was too much for them, and so it overwhelmed that person that's shoveling into the furnace. And so maybe only 500 of those calories actually made it into the furnace to progress that train along, that person along. Maybe 300 of those calories, because they were excess at the time, went into that coal storage closet, i.e. now we're starting to put on fat, even in a calorie deficit. That's a huge no-no right there. So hopefully that makes sense. If you guys didn't catch that, basically what I'm saying is that if you, even on a calorie deficit, overwhelm your body at any particular one point in time with either calories just in and of themselves, and or sugar, carbohydrates in general, basically you spike your insulin too high too quick. If you overwhelm your system, you're going to end up storing some now excess calories in real time into your closet that you may or may not have a consistent key for. And that's the other thing, because if you're doing this and you're a fat adapted person, then hey, maybe if you're misbalanced on calories one day, you could just make it up the next day, and vice versa. But if you're not metabolically flexible and you're not what's called fat adapted yet, you're in trouble with that type of process, because what you're doing is you're restricting yourself with calories already, thinking that's going to send you in the right direction. But what you're doing is you're still adding fat, or at the very least not burning fat, while you're slowing your metabolism down. And that is a huge detriment to anybody's weight loss and long-term fitness and health aspects in general, point blank period. And so hopefully you guys got something out of that. And as far as the antidote, make it simple, right? Find a process that you understand thoroughly, so that eventually you could get to the point where you understand it intuitively. And I feel like that's key, because then it lets you get away from being tied to so much process, right? Being overwhelmed with just your routine of being able to do things that help you maintain your optimum health and fitness. Make those factors as intuitive as possible, and you'll save yourself a whole lot of trouble and stress. So the lights are cutting off. I think it's time to wrap this up. I got some other stuff to do today, but hopefully you guys got something out of that. Take it easy. Coach out. See you guys on the next one.